They made two little boys walk behind their mother's coffin not out of reverence, but to preserve the image of a crumbling monarchy. On the day of Princess Diana's funeral, the world wept as two young princes walked in solemn silence behind her coffin beneath the tolling bells and a shower of roses. But behind that haunting image of strength and dignity lay a truth no one dared to reveal. And the last person to uncover that truth was the one who had once vowed to protect them, Charles Spencer. 24 years later, one sentence spoken during a shattering interview with Oprah shook him to the core. He could no longer stay silent. He traced the past, descended into the shadows of the palace, combed through classified archives, and found the document that changed everything, a memo signed by Queen Elizabeth II herself. From Montecito to Balmoral, from a sealed vault to a Netflix editing room, an invisible war was waged between a man seeking justice for his sister and her sons, and a monarchy determined to guard its silence at all costs. Then the unthinkable, the evidence vanished in the dead of night, and the last man with access was the heir to the throne. And so one chilling question echoes through the halls of power: who betrayed Diana? One last time. September 6th, 1997, London draped itself in gloom. A gray sky hung heavy like a shroud over the capital. Cold winds carried the mist of a thin rain, as if nature itself grieved for Princess Diana. Bells from Westminster Abbey tolled, each chime a stark knell. Millions lined the route from Kensington Palace to the Abbey, clutching white carnations and red roses, Diana's favorites. Tears mingled with rain glistening on the pavement. At the heart of the procession, a coffin draped in the royal standard moved with solemn precision, each step of the ceremonial guard measured to perfection. Atop it, a small card bore the word "Mummy," chosen by William and Harry to bid their mother farewell. By royal tradition, the closest male relatives walked directly behind the coffin, and the organizers ensured Prince William, 15, and Prince Harry, 12, led the mourners. William walked with rigid shoulders, his gaze locked forward, as if willing himself not to break. Harry, smaller, stumbled slightly, his red-rimmed eyes dry, forced into a facade of strength. Their silence, broadcast to over 2 billion viewers, became the monarchy's symbol of resilience amid the crisis. The press hailed the stoic princes, but just behind them, Charles Spencer. Diana's brother walked in a black suit, his face like stone. Royal protocol typically places the deceased's sibling near the back of the family line after senior royals like the Queen or Prince Charles. Yet the organizers deliberately positioned Charles right behind the princes, ahead of Prince Charles and other royals, to project a false image of unity between the Spencers and the crown. This was no mere breach of tradition. It was a calculated manipulation, thrusting Charles into the role of unwilling guardian, watching his nephews parade before the world. Each step he took was a battle between love for William and Harry and rage at the monarchy. Charles never wanted his nephews to endure this. Days earlier, in a frigid Buckingham Palace room, he clashed with the organizers, gray-suited men with icy stares. "No, Charles," roared, slamming his fist on the table. "My nephews aren't tools to display their grief. They just lost their mother." They replied with cold assurance. "Lord Spencer, the princes wish to honor their mother this way." Charles demanded to speak to William and Harry directly, but was denied, told they were preparing for the ceremony. Hesitant, a gnawing unease in his gut, he thought of the boys he once cradled. If it was their choice, he had to respect it. "Fine," he said, voice hoarse, heart aching. During the funeral, standing just behind William and Harry, before Prince Charles, Prince Philip, and other royals, Charles felt the weight of a million eyes and cameras. His unusual placement, defying tradition, was a cruel reminder he had agreed to let his nephews be exposed. He wanted to pull them from the procession, but the ritual had begun, and he was just a cog in the machine. Inside the Abbey, the scent of candle wax and lilies hung thick. Charles took the podium, his voice trembling with fury. Diana was hunted mercilessly. The media tore her soul apart, and the institutions she served failed to protect her. "I vow her blood family will shield her sons forever." The congregation erupted in applause unprecedented for a royal funeral, but hope faded. As the press praised the stoic princes, Charles felt only emptiness. In a dim abbey corridor, a silver-haired organizer whispered, "I'm surprised you agreed to let the princes walk." Charles frowned. I objected, but they said it was their choice. The man bowed his head. "You were deceived." Charles froze, the bells hammering like blows. If the boys didn't choose who forced them, his position behind William and Harry before the royals was a humiliation. He'd been manipulated to legitimize a lie. He wanted answers, but saw the millions clapping, crying outside. They didn't want truth, they wanted a symbol. If he spoke out, would they listen? Charles chose silence for William Harry, and because he wasn't yet certain of the truth. But the words "you were deceived" haunted him, seeding a quest for justice. Who ordered the princes to walk, and what did they hide? Montecito, California, March 2021. The world still reeled from Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's historic Oprah interview. In 90 minutes, Harry bared the scars left by the British monarchy, a cold system where humans become tools, emotions crushed under duty's weight. The interview was about an earthquake shaking the monarchy's perfect facade and reviving long-buried questions about Diana's 1997 funeral. On forums, social media, and in cafes from London to LA, whispers grew. Was something hidden back then? In a modest Montecito villa nestled among green hills, Charles Spencer entered carrying 2 decades of pain. No cameras, no royal advisors, no prying media, just him and Harry, uncle and nephew bound by shared tragedy. California sunlight slipped through white curtains glinting off polished wood floors, but it couldn't dispel the heavy air. In Charles's hand was a crumpled paper, a printed quote from Harry's interview that had kept him awake for nights. "No one ever asked us. We were just told this is an honor, a duty." Charles sat on a cushioned chair across from Harry, his eyes locked on his nephew. Harry, now a 36-year-old man, was no longer the trembling 12-year-old in a black suit. Dressed in a simple white shirt, hair slightly tousled, his eyes held the past pain, simmering defiance and a resolve like unquenchable fire. Silence hung for a moment, broken only by birdsong, outside, a cruel contrast to what was coming. "Is it true?" Harry Charles finally spoke, his voice trembling, as if dreading the answer would break something inside him. He clutched the paper, fingers creasing its edges. "No one asked you? Not a single person?" Harry met his gaze, his eyes both wounded and steadfast, as if he'd waited years for this moment. "Not one, Uncle Charles," he said, his voice low but sharp, slicing through the quiet. "After Mom died, we had no say in no. We were told what to do, how to appear, how to act. They said it was for her, for the monarchy, for the country. But no one asked what we wanted. No one asked if we wanted to walk behind her coffin before the world, or just grieve in peace." The words were a knife piercing Charles's chest, collapsing the moral foundation he'd clung to for 24 years. He'd believed, or forced himself to believe, that William and Harry chose to walk behind their mother's coffin, that they'd wanted to honor Diana this way. He'd comforted himself that though painful, he'd done right by supporting their decision, standing behind them in the procession, watching them exposed to millions. Now the truth lay bare, brutal and unforgiving. He'd been lied to. His nephews had no choice. They were forced, turned into props in a national drama staged to save a faltering monarchy. Charles bowed his head, hands covering his face as if to stop his heart from shattering. Images from 1997 flooded back William's vacant stare, Harry's trembling shoulders and himself powerless behind them. He recalled the whisper in the Abbey corridor. "You were deceived. Once buried, it now rang as an inescapable accusation. They used a lie to silence me," he choked out, voice breaking, almost a whisper, as if speaking to himself. "They used you, like puppets, like symbols, to manipulate the world's emotions." He looked up, eyes red at Harry. Tears threatened, but Charles held them back, knowing Harry needed strength, not weakness. "I'm sorry, Harry," he said, voice cracking. I failed to protect you and William. I trusted them, believed you wanted it. I failed your mother and both of you." Harry shook his head, a sad smile flickering. He leaned forward, placing a hand on Charles's arm, a gesture both comforting and resolute. "It's not your fault," he said, voice low, but sincere. "You were a victim too, like us. We were all trapped in that machine, one that doesn't care about feelings, only image." But in Harry's tone, Charles heard a shift, not the resignation of a 12-year-old, but the resolve of a man carving his own path. Harry wasn't just recounting the past. He was challenging it, reclaiming a voice stolen at 12. Charles saw Diana in Harry, her radiant smile, loving eyes, and unyielding spirit against adversity. The truth Harry revealed, though, agonizing, was a light piercing 2 decades of darkness. It rekindled a fire Charles thought long extinguished redemption courage, and the vow he made in his 1997 eulogy. He gripped Harry's hand, his own trembling, but strong. "I won't let this fade," he said, voice no longer shaky but fierce. "I'll find the truth, Harry. I'll ensure your mother and you both are treated with the respect you deserve. No one will silence us again." Harry nodded, his eyes glinting with hope, as if seeing a path forward for the first time in 24 years. In that Montecito room, amid golden sunlight and birdsong, Charles Spencer grasped the full scope of the betrayal. Diana's funeral, hailed as a symbol of unity and honor, was a meticulously staged performance, not to mourn Diana, but to bolster the monarchy's power, hiding cracks in its facade. And he, with his silence, had unwittingly aided the charade. But now, with Harry's confession, Charles saw a chance to make amends. This conversation wasn't just a truce eruption. It was the start of a journey one he and Harry would face together, confronting the past shadows to bring light to the future. After the emotional Montecito meeting with Harry, Charles Spencer returned to England with a fire blazing in his heart. Harry's confession that no one asked the boys about walking behind their mother's coffin awakened a new Charles. No longer the resigned brother, no longer the Earl bowing to royal protocol. He was now a warrior driven to uncover the truth, to atone for his sister and nephews. As Earl of Althorp, he requested access to the 1997 Royal Funeral Archives, claiming he was compiling family memoirs to honor Diana. Though St. James's Palace archivists were skeptical, his title and resolve opened doors to a hidden world. The basement chamber beneath St. James's Palace was cold and dim, lit only by flickering fluorescent bulbs. The air was musty, laced with the scent of old paper and dust, as if time itself was trapped in the stone walls. Towering wooden shelves held countless crates, each meticulously labeled, guarding centuries of royal secrets. Charles, in a simple but dignified suit, stood amid the room, heart pounding. He knew somewhere in these papers lay the answer to the question haunting him for 24 years. Who ordered William and Harry to walk in their mother's funeral? A middle-aged archivist, her thin-frame glasses glinting, led him to a secluded corner. "These are the documents related to Princess Diana's funeral." "My lord," she said, voice soft but sharp. She pointed to a row of dusty crates sealed with faded red wax. "But I must warn you, many are classified as sensitive. You may only view what's approved." Charles nodded, offering a polite smile, but inside he braced for battle. He hadn't come to ask permission, he'd come to claim the truth. When the archivist left, Charles began. He opened crate after crate, sifting through hundreds of pages, minutes, letters, ceremonial plans, each a puzzle piece of the 1997 funeral. Hours passed, then days, but he pressed on. His hands grew dusty, his eyes strained from faded handwritten notes, yet his resolve held firm. Then on a dreary afternoon, as the fluorescent light seemed to dim, he found it, a thin, worn folder wedged between 2 bulky files, as if deliberately hidden. The folder's cover read simply, "Funeral Cabinet Minutes, 1/9/1997. Charles opened it, his breath catching. The paper inside was yellowed, but the typed text was clear in rigid Times New Roman. The first line burned his eyes. "By direct order of the Queen, to ensure national unity and ceremonial stability, Princes William and Harry will walk behind their mother's coffin. No consultation required. Decision final." At the bottom, a stark signature in black ink, sharp as a blade, E.A. Elizabeth Alexandra. Charles's hands shook, not from shock, but from the brutal confirmation. This wasn't a whispered rumor or speculation. It was undeniable proof written by the monarchy's hand. Forcing William and Harry to walk was no agreement, no choice of two grieving boys, but a command from Queen Elizabeth II herself. The order came from her, the Queen revered worldwide. The deceived was him, the brother who believed he was protecting his nephews. And the true victims were two orphan boys forced to perform their grief before billions. Charles sank back against the shelves, the world crumbling around him. He clutched the paper fingers, creasing its edges. Memories of the funeral surged: William and Harry's pale faces, vacant eyes, the Abbey's chilling bells, the cryptic whisper, "You were deceived." Now it was clear. The Queen, with a ruler's coldness, sacrificed two children's emotions to preserve the monarchy's image, and he, with his silence, had unwittingly abetted her. Yet amid the pain and rage, a spark flared in Charles's mind. This was a chance to right the wrong. This paper wasn't just evidence, it was a weapon, a key to expose the truth and restore honor to Diana, William, and Harry. He carefully folded the sheet, slipped it into an envelope, and left the chamber carrying a new resolve: he would not let this truth stay buried another day. Balmoral Castle, late 2021. Autumn in Scotland brought a biting chill winds howling through pine forests as if whispering the monarchy's ancient secrets. Charles Spencer, in a simple black suit, entered the castle with a heavy heart but unwavering eyes. He'd requested a private audience with Queen Elizabeth II, no minutes, no advisors, no cameras. Just two souls: a queen who'd reigned for over 7 decades and a brother determined to honor his fallen sister's vow. The Balmoral drawing room was cold despite a roaring fireplace. Stone walls bore intricate tapestries and portraits of past monarchs, a reminder of this seat of royal power. Queen Elizabeth II sat in a velvet upholstered chair, her small frame radiating unyielding authority. At 95, her eyes remained piercing, as if they could see through a man's soul. Charles stood before her, hands in pockets, struggling to stay calm, his heart pounding like a war drum. "You put two children before the world to save the monarchy." Charles began, his voice steady, but laced with deep pain. He met the Queen's gaze unflinching. "You knew William and Harry didn't want to walk behind their mother's coffin, yet you ordered it. You turned my sister's funeral into a stage, her sons into symbols not for them, but for the throne." Elizabeth stared back unmoved. Her hands rested lightly on her lap, jeweled rings glinting in the firelight. "We lost Diana," she replied, her tone flat, devoid of warmth. "I could not lose the institution. The public needed unity, a symbol to trust. Without it, the monarchy would have fallen." Her words were cold, honed by centuries of power. Charles clenched his fists, nails digging into his palms until they stung. "You speak of unity, but at what cost?" he asked, voice rising, fury barely contained. "You forced two boys, just 12 and 15, to march before millions to suppress their grief to please the public. You lied to me, made me believe it was their choice. You betrayed Diana, my nephews, and the very values you claim to uphold." The Queen remained still, a statue carved from ice. "What do you intend to reveal, Charles?" she asked, her voice lower, tinged with warning. "What do you wish to destroy? For 24 years, your silence has sustained this institution. Do you think truth brings justice, or will it drag your family and the monarchy into the abyss?" Her words were a blade, sharp and precise, striking at Charles's deepest doubts. He recalled the crowds outside the Abbey, clapping, weeping, praying. He saw William and Harry's hollow eyes and his own eulogies vow. He'd stayed silent too long, not for the monarchy, but because he believed it protected his nephews. Now, with the truth in his hands, he could no longer hide. Charles stood taller, his voice no longer trembling, but fierce. "It wasn't my silence that kept this institution alive," he said, each word carved into the air. "It was the silence of two children, and I enabled it, believing your lie. I must make this right, not just for Diana, not just for William and Harry, but for my own conscience." The Queen watched him, her eyes flickering, with something regret perhaps, or weariness, but not remorse. She tilted her head, her voice slow, like a historical verdict. Silence is not a mistake, Charles. It is the art of survival, and this monarchy has weathered storms greater than Diana. Charles said nothing. He turned, leaving the Queen alone with the dying fire. Outside, the wind still howled, but within him, a resolve solidified. He would not let Elizabeth's words bury the truth. Not again. After the tense Balmoral confrontation, Charles Spencer returned to America with burning resolve. The meeting brought no reconciliation, only strengthened his belief that the truth about Diana's funeral could not remain hidden. The 1997 memo, with Elizabeth Regina's cold signature, was a torch lighting the path ahead. To shatter the monarchy's facade, Charles knew he needed more than words, he needed a documentary. In Montecito, Charles reunited with Harry in a small office, California sunlight filtering through white curtains, creating a warm but somber space. Harry, his eyes alight with the fire of a man freed from royal chains, agreed instantly to Charles's idea. They contacted Netflix, and after months of negotiations, a deal was signed. The film The Cost of Silence was crafted as a direct assault on royal power, exposing manipulation, broken promises, and the 1997 memo proof of the Queen's order. The production team, including veteran filmmakers and investigative journalists, worked tirelessly. Charles and Harry spent hours in editing rooms reviewing 1997 funeral footage. William and Harry's pale faces, the Abbey's chilling bells, Charles's furious eulogy. They interviewed witnesses, from funeral organizers to reporters reconstructing a detailed timeline. The memo, a yellowed page, was filmed close-up under studio lights. The phrase, "no consultation required," magnified a resounding accusation. But Charles insisted to the team the original memo must be kept secure, not just as evidence, but as a symbol of truth, vital for legal challenges from the royals, and to convince the public of the film's authenticity. Charles refused to sensationalize, stressing the film must be honest. "This isn't revenge," he told the director. "This is truth, and truth will speak for itself." Harry nodded, eyes resolute. "My mother was silenced. This film gives her voice back." Set for release in late 2022. The Cost of Silence sparked a media storm. The trailer, with grainy funeral images and Charles's eulogy voiceover, went viral. Public buzz grew, headlines screamed, and pressure mounted on the royals. Charles and Harry stood firm, believing the film was a call for justice, unveiling what lay behind the monarchy's velvet curtain. The original memo, a symbol of truth and key legal evidence, was stored in a high-tech safe at Althorpe Estate, a modern vault with complex codes and advanced alarms. Only 3 people knew the code: Charles, his aide Margaret Henshaw, and his lawyer Edward Langley. To strengthen family trust, Charles shared the code with Prince William, believing that despite tensions with Harry, William would honor the truth about their mother. All was set. In just one day, the film would stream on Netflix, poised to captivate millions. But at dawn on the fateful day, Charles received an urgent call from Althorpe's manager. "My lord, the safe was opened. The memo, it's gone." Charles raced to Althorpe, in the night heart pounding. The safe was empty, no signs of tampering, alarms intact, as if the thief knew the code. Charles sank to the floor, the ground dissolving beneath him. The memo, symbol of truth's shield against royal lawsuits, was gone. Without it, the film, though complete, risked being dismissed as baseless. Netflix, fearing legal battles and Buckingham Palace pressure, considered delaying the release. Charles reviewed the list of those with the code. Margaret was in London all week. Edward was in New York. Only William remained. A chill ran down Charles's spine. Had William, heir to the throne, betrayed his mother and family to protect the monarchy? The hope of exposing the truth wavered, but Charles knew the fight wasn't over. The memo's disappearance from Althorpe's safe was a sharp blade, severing Charles Spencer's hopes of revealing the truth about Diana's funeral. With The Cost of Silence set to premiere on Netflix in hours, the loss of the truth symbol and legal cornerstone left everything in ruins. Charles couldn't wait. Suspicion about Prince William, the only other person with the safe's code, burned in his mind. He flew to London the next morning, demanding an urgent meeting with William at Kensington Palace. The Kensington Palace drawing room site of the confrontation was heavy with centuries of power and secrets. Walls adorned with ancient oil paintings of English monarchs underscored the legacy William would inherit. Light from tall windows filtered through silk curtains, casting shadows on polished wood floors, mirroring the tension on the men's faces. Charles, in a dark gray suit, stood rigid eyes like steel hands, clenched to contain his rising anger. William, in a simple white shirt, but exuding a future king's aura, sat in a velvet armchair, fingers interlocked until his knuckles whitened eyes, avoiding as if wrestling within. Silence suffocated the room, broken only by the steady tick of a pendulum clock counting down to an inevitable explosion. Charles shattered the quiet, his voice low but cutting. "You did it, didn't you, William? You took the memo." William looked up, his eyes meeting Charles's. For a moment, Charles saw pain flash across his nephew's face. The pain of the 15-year-old who walked behind his mother's coffin, holding firm before the world. But that pain swiftly hardened into resolve, as if William had long prepared for this. "I didn't do it for the monarchy," he said, voice soft but firm, each word deliberate. "I did it for what I believe is right." Charles stepped closer, his leather shoes echoing sharply on the wood. His voice rose fury uncontainable, a fire stoked by 2 decades of suppression. "For what's right," he nearly shouted, pointing at William, finger trembling with rage. "For honor, duty, or because you fear the truth will shake the throne you're set to inherit. That memo proved your mother was betrayed, that you and Harry were forced to perform your grief before billions. By taking it, William, you didn't just betray me, or Harry, you betrayed your mother." William shot to his feet, the armchair scraping harshly, as if the room itself shuddered at his outburst. His eyes were red, his voice breaking, carrying the pain buried since age 12. "For my mother," he shouted, voice trembling, but powerful, each word a vow. "My mother deserves peace, not to be dragged out again. You think that film is justice? No, it's just you and Harry turning her pain into a weapon, hurting the family again. My mother endured enough suffering, enough media tearing her apart, enough being used by the monarchy. I won't let her be pulled into another war. Won't let my children grow up in the shadow of those disputes." Charles stepped back, stunned by William's eruption. In that moment, he saw not just the 15-year-old from the funeral, but a man, a father, grappling with the weight of past and future. William's motive was clear, not blind loyalty to the monarchy, but a deep love for his mother, a belief that protecting her memory meant silence, preventing new controversies that could tarnish her legacy. But to Charles, that belief was betrayal. Charles shook his head, hands clenching, nails biting into his palms. His voice lowered but remained sharp, honed by 2 decades of pain. "No, William," he said, each word etched into the air. "You're not protecting your mother. You're protecting the throne your grandmother will pass to you. You chose the side of those who manipulated your mother, who forced you and Harry to march behind her coffin like puppets before the world. By taking that memo, you destroyed the chance to clear her name, to let the world know she was betrayed by the very monarchy you're defending." William turned away, jaw clenched, as if holding back a tidal wave of emotion. He stepped to the window, gazing at Kensington's quiet gardens, where his mother once walked in her final days. His voice, when it came, trembled, but was resolute, raw, with painful sincerity. "My mother chose silence, Uncle Charles. She knew the cost of fighting the monarchy. She protected Harry and me by not exposing everything, by not letting us grow up in a public war with the family. You and Harry, you're betraying that, betraying her, betraying what she sacrificed to keep us safe." He turned back, eyes red but steady. "I took the memo to end this cycle. I want my children, George, Charlotte, Louis, to grow up free from the secrets and disputes of the past." William's words hit Charles like a fist. He stood frozen, heart-heavy, anger and pain intertwined. He wanted to shout that William was wrong, that truth was the only way to honor Diana, that silence only prolonged the monarchy's lies. But deep down, he felt William's pain, The pain of a son who lost his mother, grew up under flashing cameras and whispered power, now facing a choice between her memory and his children's future. Charles stepped closer, placing a hand on William's shoulder, a gesture both gentle and firm. His voice softened, but carried the strength of a man vowed to his sister. "William," he said, voice low but resonant, "I understand your pain. I know you love your mother, and I know you want to protect your children. But Diana didn't want you to live in lies. She wanted you free. Free from the deceit, from the protocols that caged her life. That memo wasn't just paper, it was your mother's voice, proof she was betrayed. When you took it, you didn't protect her. You silenced those who hurt her, and you forced Harry, me, and even yourself to live in the shadow of that lie." William didn't answer. He brushed Charles's hand off, his eyes no longer angry, but exhausted. He left the room, leaving Charles alone in the heavy space. Light from the window lit Charles's face, highlighting wrinkles carved by pain and resolve. He stood feeling the world against him, but the fire within still burned. Though the memo was gone, though, William stood opposed. Charles knew the fight wasn't over. The truth, though hidden, would find a way out, and he would ensure it for Diana, for Harry, and for the vow he made 24 years ago. The 1997 memo's disappearance was a final cut, severing Charles Spencer and Harry's hopes of bringing the truth about Diana's funeral to light. The cost of silence, poised to shake the monarchy, became a shattered dream. Without the memo proof of the Queen's cold order, their voices were mere whispers against royal power. Charles, in his Montecito office, stared at stacks of film reels, feeling the world turn away. But he knew the fight wasn't over. One spring afternoon in 2022, at Harry and Meghan's Montecito home, Meghan found a carved rosewood box, a keepsake from Diana. Inside was a small envelope addressed to Charles, dated August 28, 1997, 3 days before Diana's death. With trembling hands, Harry and Meghan opened it. Diana's handwriting was clear, soft, but strong. "Dear Charles, if I'm gone, protect William and Harry with the truth. Don't let them pretend again. They deserve to live true, unbound by lies or protocol. You're the one I trust. Love, Diana." Harry choked. Mom knew we'd be forced. Meghan called Charles urgently. The next day, Charles arrived, holding the letter, feeling Diana's presence, her sad but loving smile. The letter was a mandate reaffirming his mission, but also a painful reminder he'd failed. The memo was gone, the film shelved, the truth still shadowed. "I tried, Diana," Charles whispered, voice breaking. Harry touched his shoulder. "You didn't fail. Mom wanted us to live true, and we are." But Charles wouldn't surrender. Though the letter couldn't challenge the monarchy, he recalled the memo's "no consultation required" from memory, anonymously sending it to The Guardian. The brief article with the phrase in italics sparked debate, a small crack in the wall of silence. In fall 2022, Harry spoke at a mental health conference in New York. On stage, he was no longer the prince bound by protocol, but a father fighting for truth. His voice was steady. "I was a 12-year-old boy, not allowed to cry, forced to walk behind my mother's coffin, pretending to be strong. I was broken. Today I'm a father, and I vow my children won't silence themselves to please anyone." The room erupted in applause, tears streaming. Meghan in Montecito clutched Diana's letter, smiling with pride. Charles at Althorpe nodded quietly, his burden lighter. The truth's echoes lingered. Charles, once a keeper of silence, became a voice for the voiceless, supporting Diana's charities. Harry, once the boy forced to perform, became a man who refused to bow, building an honest life with Meghan for Archie and Lilibet. Diana's legacy, though shadowed, burned bright through those daring to speak truth. The cost of silence was paid with the courage to break it.